Don't smile too hard, cause my teeth ain't perfect. My body don't impress you, so go ahead, curve it.
It's a Black Elevator. I'm still Jesse Lipscombe, and I'm still black, and we're on episode 2. I love the fact that you're still with us, which means you enjoyed Dr. Wanda Costin, but today, we're switching up just a little bit. Dr. Marvin Washington. This individual is going to bring just a beautiful conversation, a really transparent conversation about life, stories about life, and also understanding how do you go into different companies and into different businesses and really pinpoint what the problems are. And then when you think you have it, is that really the problem or is there something else? A kind of mind that can really take an eagle-eye view on what's actually happening in the world and come at it with the right questions, the right approaches, and the right strategies, and all while keeping the conversation super engaging. This is a good one. Let's jump into the chat right now. Welcome to the Black Elevator, Dr. Washington. I appreciate having you on the program.
Excellent. Really excited to be here.
Yeah. So today we're gonna have a conversation because conversations are amazing. We've chatted a little bit. I'm starting to get to know you, but today we're talking about whose job is it? And I think, like with anything, when we're talking about a thing, we should really define what we're talking about. Operational definitions make it a little easier for us all to walk through. So when you hear whose job is it, my two questions I have for you is, what is the it and what is the job, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a great question. A couple of things bring to mind. The first one is I've been doing a lot of work in diversity spaces. And what I find fascinating is that every organization has a diversity committee that's amazingly staffed with people that are diverse. And I'm thinking, I think they sort of understand how to navigate diverse spaces. Maybe need to have people that are not from those backgrounds on those committees, because that's the job I think need to be done in some sense, right?
Right.
And so I think that's a tension, right? You're in an organization, you want to represent or be aware of, hey, we should do something to better everyone. Mm-hmm. Who's going to raise their hand?
Right.
People that have a passion.
Yeah.
But that might not be the job that's needed in some sense.
Interesting. Right. So in your opinion, that possibly we should have the diverse team doesn't necessarily need to be made up of all BIPOC individuals.
Yeah, there's some great research, right? And so the professor in me, I always want to go to the science when there is science. Mm-hmm. And there is some great research, and I'll say up front, don't Google what I'm saying, because I don't know exactly the name of the person in the journal and everything else. Sure. But I've read it enough, right? If a person of color sits on a volunteer committee, they don't get nearly as much credit for it for if a person of mainstream person, white male, sit on the volunteer committee.
Right.
And I think it's because people assume that you're not doing it for the credit at work, you're doing it because it's your passion project.
Sure.
So why should I reward you for volunteering your time to sit on this committee?
Yeah.
It seems totally unfair because you're volunteering just like everyone else.
Yeah, and it also leads me to think that idea of, because you're volunteering and it actually may advantageously help you, that there's something in it for you, right? And so seeing someone else step up to the plate. And this actually reminds me a little bit of something we had talked about earlier. It's this idea where I often see where white people want to help. They want to do the thing. They're passionate about it, but there's no handbook, there's no manual, and so they stall out. But this, if you wouldn't mind sharing this story about Miles and his iPad and his iMovie program, because it reminded me of, like, if you're passionate, you can figure some stuff out.
Yeah, so I have two older sons, right? They're in their 20s, and my middle son, Miles, he was short all his life, right? And so one of those things where I'm short, his mom's short, so we didn't know he wouldn't be tall, but had a passion for basketball. And this 12-year-old kid is playing basketball and is just killing it at 12, but puberty hasn't hit yet, right? Yeah. And so then he says, well, Dad, I'm a great basketball player, but I don't think the world would find me being in Edmonton. And I'm like, I don't think this year's your height, but let's go with that, right? And so then I remember him telling me to take the video camera. It must have been an actual camera right before phones. Mm-hmm. And then I have the video camera is on a tape or something. And he's in the basement on this Apple computer, and it's had iMovie, the first. And if 12-year-old boys were allowed to curse in the basement,
Right.
that's what my son would have been. Because he's 12, right? There's no manual. There's no nothing he's reading. He's just down there trying to figure it out.
Right.
And he literally started figuring it out.
Yeah.
And he started making these videotapes and making these video clips. And in some sense, his passion for basketball really became his passion for making videotapes about basketball.
Yeah.
And for a period of time, he had this website, Instagram handle, Yeag's Best Ballers, YEG Best Ballers, where he just posted these things. And I tease him now, if you can figure that out, I think
Right.
you can figure anything out if you're excited about it.
Yeah.
And that's been the mantra of our sort of like father-son coaching relationship forever.
Yeah, and what I loved about that story, it wasn't one that wasn't still full of setbacks. As you mentioned, he lost footage. Like, a lot of things that people might just want to quit after they're doing these. But at the end of the day, he had a passion for it. And sometimes that passion doesn't necessarily lead you exactly where you thought it would, but it's because you keep moving forward. Like, I was just inspired by Miles' story when you said that.
But you're exactly right? Because he had to learn. I mean, he has two parents that know nothing about this space.
Right.
So all I could do was support whatever the thing he wanted. I couldn't lead. I couldn't direct. I couldn't open up a door because I didn't know what the door was.
Right.
And so he had to come and tell me, hey, Dad, for my birthday, can I get this type of camera? Okay, sounds good to me. Not knowing the dude had researched hours on all the different types of cameras because he knew that was his present for the year.
Got it.
Like he couldn't come back in 4 months and say, hey, Dad, can I get another camera because I got the wrong one?
Yeah.
And I didn't know enough to say, oh, you want this camera over that camera.
Yeah.
And just to see that sort of like navigation, to see that sort of like, here are the pathways of where I want to go, I just find fascinating. I get inspired to watch him because it reminds me, we don't all start with 2 aces in our deck.
That's right.
But if you want it bad enough, you'll make that 2 and 7 work.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. And that's the thing, as we talk about whose job this is, and we're talking about what the it is, and what the actual job is. It feels like it's partially everybody's, and it's finding your place in it, but it's also defining where are we going and what are we doing, right? So this, as we talk about the job, what are you trying to do with the work that you're doing? Because I know there's so much of this movement is intertwined in everything you do.
That is such a great question, right? So about 2 minutes of a backstory. And so my older son is Marvin Jr. And so we've always had that, let's make sure 2 Marvins aren't in the same space. Because I want him to have his own space, right? I remember watching this Dr. Phil TV show, and it was about moms that were doing beauty pageants with daughters in beauty pageants. And how Dr. Phil basically said, Mom, this isn't your time to shine.
Right.
So I've been really aware of, this isn't my time to shine. Well, my sons are in some sense in this space. They were part of the group of University of Alberta students that brought back the Black Student Association. So not the Nigerian Student Association, not the Caribbean Student Association, but we all share something in common based on skin color.
Right.
And then Black Lives Matters hit.
Yeah.
And I live downtown. And I remember watching 10,000 people walk across my yard to get to the provincial buildings to have their demonstration. My sons are in the middle of that. So I don't want to be in the middle of it. Like, don't invite me to give a talk where they're organizing, right? Because there's one Marvin Washington already there. I'm a professor. I look at research. I try to see what's cutting edge. I try to then make informed decisions to help people that want my help in this space. I spent 4 months sort of learning, what do we know about diversity? What do we know about inclusion? Because so often people are caught unaware.
Right.
And so I had colleagues in organizations, they wanted to say something, but didn't know what to say, but feel like they needed to say something soon.
Right.
Well, you're in trouble.
Yeah, if that's what we're reacting.
When you're reacting without any real science behind you, you're gonna say the wrong thing more often than not.
Yeah.
And that's became sort of the space I operated in, really, with leadership, right? And I would start every meeting with this sort of, okay, there's probably about 5 words you can't say to me. Once we get those off the table, let's have a real conversation.
Absolutely.
Right? Because I'm okay if you want to think out loud with someone that's thought about it,
Sure.
so that when you get ready to say something, you're saying it with integrity. You're saying it in a way that won't offend people, so that your message comes through, not your performance comes through.
Absolutely. Okay, so that brings me to the question, and for a lot of the listeners, how did you arrive at this place of where you're at? And we talk about leadership, and we talk about making sure that we were analyzing people and social situations. How did you arrive at that as being your career or vocation?
Such a great question, right? Because so my first job was an engineer, and I was working for Procter & Gamble, and P&G had a very good or bad, depending on what side you're on, promotion possibility. They gave you really hard work, and if you did good, you got promoted.
Excellent. What city are we in right now?
I'm in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm from Chicago originally.
Okay.
I'm in Kansas City, Missouri. And I'm at Procter & Gamble, and eventually I get promoted to the point that I'm not doing engineering anymore. I'm managing people that are managing people that do engineering. I'm an engineer.
Right.
I know nothing about this leadership stuff.
Right.
So what do you do as an engineer to learn more about management and leadership? You go back, get your MBA.
Gotcha.
And so I'm now back on campus, University of Missouri at Kansas City. I took a class, Principles of Management, and thought, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. That was my second epiphany. First epiphany, engineering, go to university.
Right.
Second epiphany, I want that job.
Wait, let me jump in. Was your first epiphany not finding out you're not going to be an Olympian?
Oh, yes.
In the 400 meters?
That wasn't an epiphany. That was a moment of mourning, right? Because I am in high school.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying track and field. I'm running fast. I could triple jump. I could run the 400-meter dash. And in the back of my mind, this will all work out. I'll be in the Olympics, right? Until I get to this race, and I ran the fastest in the prelims ever to get to the finals.
Right.
So I'm in the finals of a legitimately real race. These are real runners. They're in the Olympics and everything else. Fortunately, I was in lane 1. Because when you're in lane 1 and you lose a race by 2 seconds, you literally have time to have, okay, I guess it's time to retire.
Yeah, you have time to grieve in the
because
race.
I'm still racing, and they're coming back to the finish line. They're starting their interviews. They're talking to their coaches. You don't know how long 2.5 seconds are until you're still running and they're done. I knew then, I guess it's time to finish university. I guess it's time to get the job. So that was my first epiphany,
Right.
what job do I want?
Right.
Engineering. Second epiphany, I want that job as a professor. You get paid to read, to write, and to talk to people. Quit P&G, quit the MBA, went back to Northwestern where I got my undergrad to get my PhD, really because it was in Chicago, and I'm from Chicago, born and raised.
Right.
I didn't know it was the best PhD program in the country. Naive, right?
Yeah,
I had no one in my family to help me navigate through this.
Got you.
So I just picked it. But a friend of mine who I worked with at Procter & Gamble was doing some consulting work in Chicago. So poor kid, getting this PhD, no money for that. A friend of mine said, do you want to go consult? Of course. You're going to pay me to do something, to read, write, or talk. I remember the first time I'm talking to people at the Postal Service, doing some consulting for them. And I was like, what do I say? Well, what I do as a professor, I go back and read, I go back and write some, come up with what to say.
Right.
And that sort of has become my sort of mantra, right? I have to be clear. I used to say Bill Cosby, but not the Bill Cosby that's in the news now.
Right.
Much more Fat Albert.
Got you.
Right?
There he is. Yes.
I see myself as sort of the Fat Albert show. What's the Fat Albert show? In a nutshell, you have the character Fat Albert. The gang that he was with got into some trouble. Fat Albert would tell them, don't do it.
Right.
They did it anyway, got into trouble.
Yeah.
Fat Albert would help them,
Right.
and then they would sing a song about it.
You're right.
Every episode, that's the Fat Albert episode.
That's right. Yeah.
I think that's sort of me. You as an organization, you have some rockiness.
Sure.
I'm going to sort of tell you what I think may be some advice. You may or may not listen.
Yeah.
If you don't listen, you might remember, oh yeah, Marvin says something about this.
Right.
You call me back.
Yeah.
I didn't say, remember what I said about blah, blah, blah,
Real
blah.
life lessons, because now we could see
Yeah.
that. Remember when I said don't do this?
And then we
There
sing a
it
song
is. And
about
what
it.
song
at the
you
end.
sing?
And that's the books
Yeah,
I write.
there it is.
That's the writings I do to sort of say, this is the thing I want you to remember for the next time. And that's really guided my career. Organizational change, culture development, some strategic development, really sort of helping organizations think through that it isn't just one piece of that.
Sure.
And so what you think is a leadership problem might be a culture problem.
Right.
what you think of as a culture problem might be a strategy problem. And then when you sort of bring in this overlay of, I like much more inclusion, because I think as soon as we say diversity, we think 1970s, we got to count how many black people, how many people in wheelchairs. We're really saying inclusion.
Yeah.
We're really saying you hired all these people. Don't you want them to contribute to their fullest?
Yeah, don't you want them to feel part of the team, feel included on the team?
So is that a culture problem?
Right.
Is
Yeah.
that a leadership problem?
So,
is
yeah,
that
so it's clear
a goal strategy problem?
So that seems like your job in this problem. It seems relatively clear at this stage, and you come in and you can point out some problems and help walk people through them. So then those companies and the people you're speaking to, their job then becomes to implement some of these. Then we have employees that are listening, hopefully, and then taking this to their family, and you can see how the job trickles down. But also, I'm wondering, in your times of consulting and strategizing, what's the commonality that you see as a problem, a pushback that you've seen across the board?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will put those into two camps, right? I think many of us, when we think of anything that involves change, we view it through a lens of loss. And so when I say I want to change something, you don't often hear you're going to gain something. You hear you're going to lose something. So now let's bring in anything about bringing more people to the table. The people already at the table interpret every conversation about loss.
Right.
So you're telling me that if there'll be other people here, I get less.
Right.
So you're telling me if there'll be other people that are applying for the job, I might not get the job. And so you just have to work people through how this change is probably not as much of a loss as you think.
So how do you do that?
Well, I start with, this is, again, the track and field in me. I'm not telling you didn't break the tape of the 100-yard dash. You broke the tape. I'm thinking maybe some people ran 150 yards.
Sure.
And you ran 100.
Right.
Don't you really want to know that when you broke the tape, it's because you really was the fastest?
Right.
Because right now, I don't know if that's true. So I'm not telling you didn't break the tape.
Right.
But it feels like there weren't all the runners in the race at the starting line.
Right.
And that seems to soften the blow, because so many people think that what I'm really saying is you didn't break the tape.
You're right.
You actually didn't win this race.
Yeah, it becomes a different question.
Yeah, it is.
But it also becomes a question about morals and ethics.
Yeah.
As opposed to did you do the thing or not the thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's the one side of the conversation. It's all about what we are saying in 2021. Whoever won the competition, we want to make sure it's a fair competition. Now, given that this world is still dominated by white, Christian, heterosexual men, I think you guys are still breaking lots of tapes.
Right, sure. See,
So I have no imagery that in the next 6 months the world will be ruled by people that are totally diverse in a bunch of measures.
Yeah.
I just think now we're saying let's actually make the race the same race for everyone. And that's that side, right?
So then, in that side, there's that question of, all right, so I broke the tape and I won some prizes and awards. Do I have to give them back?
Yeah. And to me, the answer is like, no, I'm not telling you that. What I'm saying is, now that you have broken the tape, what can we do to make sure that the races underneath you are equally fair?
Right.
Because what do we know? Again, this is the research. We know pretty clearly that we like, how to say this? It's worse than you think. I actually don't like people. I like me.
Right.
And you remind me of me.
Right, sure. Yeah.
So again,
affinity bias.
So it's worse than you think, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's easy to say, I like my friends. Nah, you really don't.
Yeah.
You like yourself.
Seeing yourself in your friends.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so then what that means is, once I have got my position, my default is to mentor people that are like me.
That's right.
And so that's the break we have to break. We have to say, and I tell people up front, everything I'm getting ready to tell you, the answer is it takes more time.
Yeah.
So I am from the US. I like basketball, and I understand, pick some TV show. If you came up to me with those 3 likes, we're quickly going to coffee.
Sure.
Someone comes to me and says, I don't understand any of those. I got to take the next 2 seconds, the next 2 minutes.
That's right.
To blow through that.
Find that spot.
To find that spot.
Yeah.
That's the time.
And it exists for sure. It just takes that little bit extra work.
Why? We're all human.
Yeah,
we all have so many things in common.
One of the things that comes to mind in this, it feels like if we're bringing BIPOC individuals to the table, if you're going to pick any individual or group of individuals that's used to having to try to find ways to have rapport outside of what they normally like, then it's actually going to be easier in that sense.
Yes.
I'm seeing it as like, let me have some leaders there who aren't only going to act on affinity bias,
Yes.
because their whole life didn't afford them the privilege to do so. So again, it's just the more diversity and inclusivity there is at the table, it'll probably work out better for those who are worried, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So, and that's that side, right? I was working with a group of people, and Zoom is so wonderful, right? Because you literally see all 12 people around the table.
Right.
Because they're in different boxes, right? All white males.
Yeah.
And, we had to get past the defensiveness, that first side.
Absolutely.
And then someone finally said, we're having as intimate a conversation you can have in Zoom. And someone finally said, I just don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And my first thought was, how can you not know what to say?
Yeah.
And then it dawned on me, oh, you're not black.
Right.
You don't know anybody.
Right.
You've had, if it isn't this conversation you're having with me, you will go until you see me again, not
Without
talking to anyone
absolutely.
Other than, may I help you?
Yeah.
Other than, excuse me, sir, could you help me? Other than in world conversation,
Right.
you will have no intimate conversations with anyone.
That's right.
And that really hit me.
Yeah.
That I live in the world that everywhere I go is a BIPOC conversation.
That's right. All the time. In
There are
everything you
people
say.
that live in worlds that don't have that. So I do have to reach over.
Right, because whose fault is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So
Yeah.
if you're that person on that Zoom call and you're right, I'm not going to see another black person until I see you again.
Yeah.
Is that my fault? And then is it my job then to find more?
Yeah,
right?
It is, but then we have to be gentle that not everyone you find is ready to help you with that conversation.
That's right.
And that's my second part.
Yeah.
So my first problem is change is lost.
Got you.
My other problem is a lot of people that are from BIPOC backgrounds have learned to be really suspicious because they've been burned literally in terms of bad things have happened to them, in terms of harassment has occurred.
Sure.
So just because you're coming over to invite me out to coffee doesn't mean I'm going to automatically say yes.
Yeah, walls aren't down.
Because
just
the
'cause you
last time I
invited me.
did that,
That's right.
bad things happened.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
yeah,
so that's the tension.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, yeah,
tension
yeah.
is if we've done our job right, we've created in some people an appetite to actually reach across. But now they're reaching across to people that the last time they reached back got burned.
Right.
The last time they reached back got harassed.
Yeah.
Macroaggression, microaggression, bullying. And so they're saying, I tried it, it didn't work. I know, try again.
Yeah, and it's that assumption that because you tried, it should have just happened, right? And I see on both sides. There's the times where you can see where we need to go across, right? But then also there needs to be that same level of grace where, if you go across and you don't get exactly what you were hoping, then you don't jump out of it. There's a reason why that reaction happened. And it's that we want to understand that has more and more questions.
And that's and when you asked about the challenges, that to me is, I think, I start every conversation with, if you are indeed racist, sexist, homophobic, I can't fix that.
Right.
That's not my job.
Right.
If you are scared, nervous, curious, we can have that conversation.
Sure.
In that group of people who are scared, nervous, curious, wanting to understand more, maybe have a couple of minutes of consciousness where they can put their ego aside to recognize they may have created some challenges.
Right.
That one is you got to keep going at this thing.
Yeah, it's interesting.
This isn't a quick.
It's not a quick fix.
It's not a quick
doubt.
fix.
And these operational definitions are so important because that idea, if you are indeed racist, sexist, homophobic, then I can't help you. But then my question is anybody not? And I say not in the sense of we're in a white supremacist, cisgendered, neurotypical world where everything, regardless of what we're doing, is just funneled in to that. It's almost impossible not to be. I wouldn't label myself as sexist. I do as much work as I can. I wouldn't label myself as ableist, but also everything in the world is ableist, so it affects me.
Yeah, I mean that much more from a policy standpoint.
Got you.
Right?
Yeah.
Not from affinity, not from an affinity bias standpoint.
Understood.
Right? I appreciate that just like there are black barbershops, there are cultural places all over the world. I have no problem with that.
Right.
My only challenge is when you bring that into the workplace and say, over my dead body will we
Exactly.
hire a person that, promote a person that. That's what I mean in terms of that language, right?
That makes sense, yeah.
So many of us so many of us started in places of comfort because we started in homes of comfort, and that's what have guided our thinking. Back to, that humanness of us, we do have a threat, no threat. Well, if everyone around me in my early formation looked like me, it becomes easy to sort of overlay threat, no threat on that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? And so that's the thing we got to break out of. And, I'm probably more a glass half full person. And I see more and more people at least trying to break out of that and say, I recognize now that it was purely just a bias in me.
Yeah.
I don't like the phrase implicit bias because all biases are implicit.
Right.
Unless you're racist, sexist.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, we go buy a car. We have a bias about the list price.
Sure.
If you tell me the car costs $50,000, I'm going to negotiate around $50,000.
Exactly.
No one ever says I'm going to negotiate around $20,000.
Right.
Because that list price is a bias.
Yeah.
So we all have biases in that sense. Many of us are trying to work on them. That's the conversation I'm getting at.
Yeah, and we're talking about that idea of like, things aren't just what we see, right? And even when the half glass, half full and half empty, and I've always been a fan, and when I heard someone say, well, the glass is always full, right? Half empty and half full because there was a liquid in it. But there's also all of the different molecules. The glass is actually always full. It's just what are we talking about? What can we do with what we see, right? So it's always a full glass, but what is it you were looking to use out of said glass? And once we start to do that, which happens with inclusivity, right? And so you've mentioned this. These are some of the challenges that you've seen across the board as a consultant. But on the other side, what are the things that are keeping you hopeful that you are also saying?
Yeah. Well,
so this is my glass half full. It's full.
The one thing I like is that we are recognizing that it is a question about inclusion of everyone, not a counting exercise. Because I think previous versions of this was a counting exercise.
Absolutely.
And then it became, okay, a woman counts for 1, a black counts for 2, but an indigenous person counts for 2.5.
Right.
A person in a wheelchair counts for, and then you had HR just like crazy trying to check a bunch of boxes. And I'm like, I don't know the unicorn of a minority person that's in a wheelchair. There's also a homosexual. There's also, but it feels like that's what we're going for in that counting exercise.
Right.
Now we realize that's not what we're going for.
Yeah.
We're going for inclusion.
Yeah.
You've hired smart people.
Yeah.
Don't you really want them to give all they can when they're thinking about work?
Yeah.
And so why don't we try to get rid of barriers so they can give all they can?
Absolutely.
Like that part is like, yes, that's the language, right? That's the sports in me. My wife and I have these wonderful conversations about football. See, I said, the reason why so many guys don't have body images is because of football. You can be short and fat and still play.
Absolutely.
You can be tall and thin and still play.
That's right.
You can be, and I think that's what we're wanting in terms of the conversation around the table.
Yeah.
It isn't that I am color race blind. Is that I don't want you to think that's holding you back.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want you to think because of who I am, I can't do something.
Yeah, and you even mentioned it just now on language and how important words are, right? And so I have to say this, as a beginner in understanding ableist language and things like that, I start to hear things that I wouldn't have heard beforehand. Like when people say colorblind. I'm like, well, no, you're not. You're not blind. Actually, no, there's blind people who are not racist.
Yes.
Right? Like when you're like, well, that's crazy you did that. Actually, no, sane people do wild stuff. Right? And you start to see, and it just keeps opening and opening, which is a great feeling. But also, no matter what, I keep finding out how much there is more, how much more there is to learn. For me, it feels good. For you, when you find out something you may have done that might be harmful, and people let you know about it, how do you handle those interactions?
My 2 older sons, I coached them early in basketball, and then a really good friend of mine, he's a school teacher in town, and he coached the grade 9 girls team, and he had a coach lined up for the grade 7 girls team. That coach bailed. So I get a phone call at 2:00. Hey, Marvin, can you help me out at the tryout for the grade 7 team?
Right.
Okay, I like you well enough, I'll show up there. I'll never forget, first of all, surprise number 1, about 60 girls showed up.
Right.
And my sort of, bias, grade 7 girls, 8 girls are gonna show up as the team. So I'm already like, wow.
Right.
And then with boys, you separate sort of the tall kids from the short kids, guards versus centers. And I'll never forget, I got 70 kids. I'm trying to break them up. I go, you're big, you're small, you're big, you're small. After the third girl started crying when I called her big,
right.
I realized that is not the right word. I'm so sorry. I got to figure out what's the word. And that's always been my position since then.
Right.
I can only say what I know if what I'm saying is not conveying what needs to be conveyed. Stop me and I'll correct it.
Yeah, then we'll switch it.
I got no, like I literally have no problems. Like there is no defensive-ness.
Sure.
Because it's one of the things I talk in terms of leadership, it's a full-time job working on you. Like I understand that we so badly want to fix everyone else. You have a full-time job just getting you right.
Right.
And so I'm okay if you call me on, hey, you know, what you just said may not be the right word you're trying to use there. Excellent.
Yeah, thank you. You actually did a little bit of the work for me because this is like a full-time job.
I hope you don't do it in a, negative, I got you kind of way.
No doubt. Yeah.
Because I'm open in the beginning to saying, I don't got it all right.
Yeah.
And
I wasn't preloaded with all the facts, and I'm going to keep on learning them.
And
Absolutely.
so I'm okay if I say something and you say, that wasn't, in some sense, it's almost like I want to say thank you because I think that means you feel close enough that you can tell me.
And you were listening.
Yeah.
There's like another,
so in all of those things, I actually feel like it's a good moment because how often do we hear something and we don't feel like we can say it because we're worried about the repercussions.
That's absolutely right, which happens so much. And again, back to whose job is it, where people are scared to make any moves because they might make a mistake, which we probably will. That's what we do. We make errors.
We're human.
Of course, and they often don't move, right? They are a little stagnant in where they want to go towards.
And that's sort of my I start with ground rules. And so in every teaching moment, even when I teach my undergrad students, I start with, this is a class, let's start with some ground rules. We start with grounds about communication.
Sure.
All right. Open, honest, and direct. I assume that whatever you're going to ask me, you actually are asking because you care.
Right.
And so I assume for that to happen, we need to have what we call confidentiality. And so even in this setting, if we wanted to talk about the university, for example, no one's in here tweeting this out that the professor said this about his boss or her boss, or then I'm going to be jaded, right?
Yeah.
But also support. We're all learning, and I make that clear. We are all learning.
Yeah.
And so we're in a class where we need to communicate to learn. You have an era of confidentiality. There's no I gotcha moment.
For sure.
And we're supporting each other.
Yes, you're creating a space that allows us to.
Once we have that space now, we're going to be human. We're going to make a mistake. We're going to mess up.
All right. So, Dr. Washington, you operate on the high C level, often working with people, consulting businesses as it trickles all the way down. And this podcast is called The Black Elevator. We're elevating the youthful Black voice. So now I'm hearing, so young students just out of school looking to enter the market. As I see the work you're doing from the top down, what's their job to hold the businesses accountable that they're walking into? Because you do walk into it with a little bit of trepidation. I just want to get a job. So it's whatever. I'll take it. What can they do on their spot to ensure that they're walking into a safe spot where they can grow and flourish?
So many great questions. You are clearly awesome at what you're doing.
Well,
These are great questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I do what I call informal mentoring to students, really through basketball coaching, right? So before the COVID shut everything down, I still coach a variety of kids. I have a sweet spot for kids that look like me. But I'm open to mentoring anyone, right? So it's not like I'm one side or the other kind of thing. And I'm like, you have to be reminded of a couple of things. One, in the words of my mom, one always beats zero. So what do I mean by that? I think your job as a person entering to the world is to get a step into the world. Now, if I got 6 choices, pick the one that's the best space for you.
Sure.
But I don't know if I would ever recommend you staying on your parents' couch because the one job may not fulfill all of you. So that's my bias. I tell people up front. My mom says this, one beats zero all the time. And so don't be telling me you didn't take a job because the manager didn't let you start at 7 a.m. and you got no job. But having said that, there are markers of harm and there are markers of dissatisfaction.
Yeah, like what?
Markers of harm. This place, the guy wanted to touch my hair.
Got you. Yeah.
right? It's 2021. You're not touching black people's hair no more.
Sure,
right?
sure.
You know, like
Yeah.
you know, markers of harm. I'm in a wheelchair and I see no ramps.
Understood. Right.
Like so in 2021, if you haven't done that, then this just may not be the place for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Right. Even if I gotta say I got no job.
Right.
This may not be the place for me.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
There's a lot of markers of dissatisfaction, right? I got 9 people I work with, and 8 of them are awesome, and this one guy still has a chip on his shoulder and looks at me like, you only got it because you're a minority, blah, blah, blah. That's just dissatisfaction.
That's right.
Because that collection in my job looks like my collection in the world.
Right.
Now, at my age, I feel pretty confident in teasing those two apart in the choices I make. At 20, 18, 22, you're learning to tease those apart.
Yeah.
And I find students err on both sides.
Yep.
Students err on the side of, if it isn't nirvana, if it isn't the holy place, if it isn't everything is wonderful,
Right.
I'm not going.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the world we live in, right? We were talking earlier, being from Chicago, people had this illusion about Atlanta.
Right.
Because Atlanta is a place where there are so many blacks and doing so many wonderful things. Oh my God. And they were like, nah, this place still got some challenges
Absolutely.
too. So
Yeah,
don't be
yeah,
thinking
yeah,
that
yeah,
this
yeah,
is just the best place in the world, because there isn't that place yet, right? So that's err on that side. I think some of them also err on the side of, because I'm so hungry for a job, I'll take anything.
Right.
Nah, you're in harm's way.
Yeah.
And so part of my sort of helping young people is navigating that, knowing that it's unique for you because you're unique. So what you might think is just dissatisfaction, others might think is harm.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
That's fine.
Right?
But
there is no rule book that
what
says,
these are.
But that's going to help you tease apart, you know, what job,
Sure.
what friends you want to keep along. Now you
Yeah.
have choices in your friends. You know, I think about my 2 older sons, and when they got to university, I remember watching them go through the struggle of having to make friends.
Right.
Because up until then, they played team sports. And in team sports, those become your friends.
Right.
Especially a big sport like football.
Absolutely.
You got 70 kids on that team.
Yeah, you're
you
gonna find a
clearly will
couple.
gravitate
Yeah,
with a couple,
absolutely.
right? And then basketball, you got 12 kids, you'll
Yeah.
gravitate to a couple. Now they got university.
Yeah.
And now they're not playing those sports.
Right.
So now they have to make friends. And they were trying to navigate this same conversation of the collection of people that could be my friends. Which ones are good with just a little rough around the edges?
Right,
Which
yeah.
ones are, nah, this is harm's way.
Yeah,
This is-
it almost
this
sounds
is-
like dating. Sounds
Yeah,
like
yeah.
all of these things. It's that same idea, which brings me back to almost the first thing you said when we had a phone call was when you go out and when you're consulting, often they don't know what the problem is.
Yeah.
Right? So they come in and say, I need some help, and I think it's this, but it's actually this.
Yeah.
I go into a job, I think it's harmful for me, but actually I'm just a little dissatisfied. But once we can clearly understand what it is, we can navigate much easier. And it even sounds like this idea, if you know, Dr. Washington was talking to his 20-year-old self, you know, he'd probably be giving him some of those tips. So that leads me to that question. If you could tell your 20-year-old self how to navigate the world in a way that provides the least amount of harm and the least amount of dissatisfaction, what would you have said to them?
Yeah, great. I would probably give myself permission to have a bit more patience. I think because I was I ran the 400 meters sprinter, I triple jumped, 6 seconds of things over. I just assumed everything was supposed to happen quickly.
Right.
And if it didn't happen quickly, it wasn't meant to be.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think I probably missed out on some opportunities early on. I mean, I'm happy where I'm at now.
Absolutely.
But upon reflection, I can see some things that if I had gone to a second cup of coffee with the person,
Understood.
if I had knocked on the door again, all they said was they were busy. They didn't say don't come back.
They didn't say no. They
But
didn't
in
say
my
no.
mind,
Yeah.
they're busy. Oh, they don't want to talk to me.
Yeah, right.
So a little bit more patience,
Sure,
and then probably what I'm working on myself on now is more appreciation.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I mentioned earlier, it's a full-time job we're working on me, which means it's a full-time job you're working on you. Which means I have to allow you to have a bad day.
That's right.
I have to allow you to say something and then upon reflection realize that was the exact opposite thing of what you were trying to say.
Right.
And so when you come back to me to say, hey man, that exchange we had, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Believe them.
Yeah.
Right? Like take them on their word, right?
Yeah,
Because I see now that sort of appreciation, that sort of gratitude for people that are trying to make it, that's something that I think I'd be more along on my journey if I would have been a bit more patient with that lesson earlier on.
Yeah, I think those are some strong lessons I think that can go across the board. Patience, so much of that, right? And forgiveness and space so that we can actually see each other.
I had a really close friend of mine, and this is when Colin Kaepernick took his first knee.
Sure.
Right, he took the knee, and everybody's complaining about that. I said, you have to appreciate that it felt like the civil rights struggle in the 60s occurred in days. Those things occurred in years.
Absolutely.
The Montgomery bus boycott was, 400 days or something like that. Right. That wasn't a weekend when they didn't take the bus. So imagine someone in Montgomery walked to work that would have been far enough for them to take a bus to work for 400 days.
Right.
I think it's so easy for us now. Our phones, everything is quick.
Instant.
To think it's supposed to be instant.
That's right.
And I realize that lesson, what I'm telling my sons, what I'm telling myself, it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing.
That's not
it's bad because it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
Things take a while.
And that lesson, again, is not just for your sons or not just for the youth. I think that one we can take all the way till we're done with whatever days we have.
It doesn't mean not to call it out.
No,
it doesn't mean not to be frustrated.
It doesn't mean not to act.
It does. Exactly.
It just means not to expect it happens now.
Yeah, and to be like, I did something wrong because it wasn't there now. And I think that's what I hear so often. I went to university. I didn't get a job the day after I graduated. Man, I wasted my time.
Yeah.
No, getting jobs are hard.
There's a reason why these things become bumper stickers.
Yeah.
Because they're pretty much universally true. Like, it's about the journey. We know it. We hear it all the time. But sometimes we're like, well, I want my journey to be done right now, right? But we really don't. We look back and we can appreciate those moments. This is a question that has absolutely nothing to do with whose job is it, but something tells me that you would give a phenomenal recommendation of a book that has changed your life.
Oh, wow. People accuse me of always talking in twos. I'm going to talk in twos again.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. 2 books have changed my life. The first book I recommend to everyone. It's Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Okay.
If you don't know the book, he's in a concentration camp, and in the concentration camp, he survives, and he writes a book about his journey through. And it's really, I think, the best treatment of you have to find your journey and find your path and find your purpose.
Right.
I think it's the best treatment because it's written by a person that was in a concentration camp.
Right.
The Nazis didn't give him pen and paper.
Exactly.
So it's written in broken language, right? That's that one. Another one that gives me hope in some sense, it's a book called Tuesdays with Morrie.
Yes.
I had a really good mentor, Bob Bashan. Marvin Jr.'s middle name is Bashan. That's how close this mentor is to me. He gives me this book, Tuesdays with Morrie, and it's about a relationship with a person, with their mentor. And in the end, Morrie dies.
Right.
And so I remember calling Bob up and like, are you dying? My God.
Right.
He was like, no, I just wanted you to get a sense of the relationship. And I think that book captures nicely what we all need in our life.
Yeah, I agree.
I think we all need someone that has been around the corner.
Yeah.
We all, at my age, I still have people that have been around the corner. So what's important for me now? I'm probably a decade and a half away from retirement. So who do I need around my life?
Right.
Someone who is a year from retirement.
Sure, exactly.
So I can make sure that I've hit the trajectory, right? My brother and I, it's just so amazing. Between the two of us, we've had a child in every decade. So there's a child in the 30s, a child in the 20s, a child in the teens, and now I have one that's 18 months old.
Right.
We talk all the time about.
Absolutely.
So what is it like having a kid that's 16 because his last kid is now 30?
Right.
I'm like, well, mine that's 23 is closest.
Yeah.
And so those are again, people that know me, I have a list of books I would say have like Black authors or.
Sure.
But you got to find your path there,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
But when I think about you finding your path, I recommend to everyone, if I'm not giving you the Bible, I'm giving you Man's Search for Meaning.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And then if you really want to understand what I think the word mentor or what that word actually means, right?
Tuesdays with Morrie is unbelievable.
Yeah,
it does.
Because it's so solidified to me. I need someone that's been around this corner.
Absolutely. For me, there's a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull,
Yes.
short book, but also that whole mentor-mentee fully opened my eyes, and one of my favorite books, without a doubt.
Excellent.
Yeah. Dr. Marvin Washington, this was a phenomenal chat. I fully appreciate it. Is there anything you want to leave with our viewers?
I'm still in this quote, right? And it's become my new, like it may be the title of my next book.
Gotcha.
I still a quote, right? So the Monty Williams, he's the head coach of the Phoenix Suns. And if you know his story, overcame difficulty, out of coaching, back in coaching. He's coaching the Phoenix Suns. And they're winning, and now they're losing. And they interview the coaches when they're in the locker room, and he says, what you want is on the other side of hard.
Yeah.
That hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like that's, if I got a tattoo, that would be a tattoo.
Yeah.
Because he said it so, he didn't say it inspirationally.
Yeah, just matter of fact.
It was like, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
Because what we want on the other side of hard.
Absolutely.
And to me, if I can leave you with something, it would be to realize that whatever it is you want is on the other side of hard. Why? Step one, your parents did the easy stuff. You're like, whatever generation we're in,
Right.
the generation before us did the easy stuff.
Right.
So all that's left is hard.
Right.
Like all that's left is hard.
Yeah.
And so whatever you want in life is on the other side of hard. So then the question for you is not to give up when it gets hard.
Actually seek out hard situations.
Because that
We
means you're
already
in the
know
right
what's
spot.
on the-
You're going on the right side.
Absolutely,
And it
absolutely.
literally was one of those, like, I'm watching the game. I'm tearing up.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I didn't expect that. I didn't
Yeah.
expect knowledge, right? At the end of a
Exactly.
basketball game like that. So that's my, if I could give you 2021,
There it
whatever
is.
you want on the other side of hard.
On the other side of hard.
Yeah.
These are lessons from Dr. Washington. It's been amazing. The advice that you've given, patience is a beautiful thing. And just watching your process. I like seeing that. The idea of discovering what is the actual problem we're trying to solve. Taking some time, right? Basically, a lot of that is just taking some time to look at the whole situation, not just your situation. So thank you for that insight. And good luck with the next phase of your career. It sounds very, very exciting.
Excellent.
We'll talk soon.
Excellent. And I appreciate you guys taking the time and inviting me here.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot.
I kept reminding, said I was too busy lying. I laugh at sappy shit, but that's me hiding. Thought I wasn't worth loving. Ooh, I've been so low for too long.
Lusamba Vanessa Kalela, better known as Lukayla. She's a Congolese Canadian singer-songwriter. She immigrated to Canada as a young child from the Democratic Republic of the Congo and is currently based in Toronto. Amazing fact, she began her music career as a writer for Jennifer Hudson. She's been flown all over the world from LA to New York, and she was the grand prize winner in the 6th annual RBC Emerging Musician Program. Thanks for listening to The Black Elevator.
In my head, in a voice so chatty, comparing who I am, wanna be happy, and it feels like I've been living life through a screen. Feels like I'm giving up the devil in me. Ooh, I've been so low for too long. Ooh, I've believed y'all for too long. Now I think I'm ready.